In this video, we are going to see what is a component in React. In React, a component is a sort of a reusable piece of UI. So let's say some part of the UI you are using at multiple places. Then you can take it and create a component out of it so that it becomes reusable. So for example, let's say here at the top I am having let's say sort of a h1 tag or h2 tag, let's say, which is saying that let's say it is a sorry, this is an header. So this is a header. Now the point is that this whole tag, right, if you want to reuse at multiple places, then this element can be moved to a component, and this can be one thing, this can be multiple things. So let's say this thing is somewhat complicated, so I'm just showing you for simplicity that it's one liner, but it can be like a whole component. So this can be like this, and inside this like let's say it is inside p tag, something like this is there. Then this whole thing, let's say it is used at some other place also. For simplicity, I'm saying that let's say it is used inside this component only at some other places. Now you can see that there is some duplication, right? So why don't I put it inside a component and I can reuse it? That is the whole point of using a component. So for simplicity, let's take this component and let's take this JSX element and create a component out of it. For that, inside src folder, let's create a new folder called components, and inside that components, let's create a new file which is going to have our new component, and let's name that header.js. Okay, now the thing is that the general convention is that normal script files or normal files which are not components, generally they are named with smaller case. But generally, if the file is a if the file contains a component, then the generally convention is that its name should be same as the component name, and it should be capitalized. So we know that all JSX inside JSX, whenever we use components, so for example app, A starts with capital letters, so it should be camel case, right? So in the same manner, we should name our files also. And then like here we create this function and return some JSX, then that becomes a component, right? Then in a similar manner, we can create a function, let's say called header, and that header function returns a JSX, and now that JSX is the reusable piece of UI. So this UI, okay, so this UI. So let me show you earlier, when this thing was not there, then this is an header, right? It is showing like this, right? So let's remove this for now. So again it goes back to this thing, that is fine. And now inside header.js, I'm trying to create a component out of it. So this thing is fine, a component is created, but then you have to export this so that you can import this, and that is how we are going to do. We are going to use ES6 modules. So export default header, and now we have created a component and we have exported it, and now we can take this component and import it here. So import, generally you should use the same name, however it's a default export and import, so you can use anything, and then you use /component/header. okay, and then this is a component which you can use anywhere inside JSX, like this, like any HTML element. A component is also generally used like an HTML element. So you can remember earlier, this whole app thing is also a component, and in fact this thing was also used like in JSX like this, if you remember, right? In a similar fashion, this header thing is a component, right? And this component is being used here like this. You can import and use it, and now if you save, then you can see that again it is available right earlier. But now this piece of UI, it can be hundreds of lines of code, which can have like hundreds of or thousands even of lines of code where it contains a whole component where some JSX and some complicated logic and some expressions, many things are there, right? So we'll come to those complicated examples, but right now we can understand that we have moved that to a separate component and then it is reusable. What is the meaning of reusable? Now if I simply take this and I try to use it at some other place, then also it is usable. For the example, for simplicity right now let's use here only, here again, then we can see that it is duplicated, right? Because that is how we have used this header, right? Whenever this header is rendered, then the same piece of logic, same piece of UI which is written here, that is going to be utilized everywhere, right? And for example, right now if I'm going to change anything here, so this is sorry, not an header, a header, and this is let's say this is an awesome header, okay, then you can see that everywhere it is changed, because that is how it is, right? And later we'll see that if we use styles with components, okay, so in fact let's take that example also. Let's say new file, and the convention is you should use the same name for CSS also, header.css, and then you can import, firstly you can import, we can import CSS. So for example, let's say dot slash header dot CSS, and we know that this is how generally a normal CSS is import. Later we'll see that there is something called CSS modules, which has a slightly different syntax, but right now let's see this. And then whatever I write inside here, that will be applicable. So here I can say that yeah, so why not have let's say class, and we know that it should be class name is equal to header. And if I do that, then I can take this class and then I can define my own class here, and let's say color is, let's say, teal. And if I save this, then I can see that every place wherever that component, so you understand that this whole UI is a separate entity itself, and it can be reused anywhere I want, and at one place if I make changes, then everywhere that change will be reflected. So for simplicity I just remove the other things. So this is the thing. Now one more thing, that you could target this from anywhere else also. So for example, let's say I don't use this header CSS right now, so obviously it becomes red, but inside I know that this thing is going to this header is going to be rendering h2 tag, right? I know that. In fact, I know that because inside header I have used h2. I can also see here inside body that that header part is essentially an h2 an element which is h2, okay. So what I can do is that from here also I can do the same thing. That what if I say that inside app, if there is an h2, then let's say its color is teal. So you can see that this thing also works. In fact, you can use its class name also. So I know that this is going to render an element with this thing, so I can rather use this also. So you can see that this thing also works fine, okay. Okay, so this sort of thing, styling, everything like HTML, everything will work out of the box. It's just that you have to properly just understand that what is going to happen, what is going to happen inside this. But generally this is not recommended, right? Something like this is not recommended. Why? Because now your whole UI is not at one place, right? If you want to change something here, then that change is also somewhere outside. If you simply move this to some other project or something, then it will not work out of the box, right? So generally the convention is that you should not use something like this like outside. Generally the whole piece which is a component, whatever the dependencies, whatever the styles, whatever the things, everything should be at one place, okay. So it should be something like this, okay. So yeah, so that is the first part. The second part is that, yeah, now we have created a component which is which now has a reusable piece of code. Okay, but in React there are two types of components: a functional component and a class based component. Now a functional component is exactly what we are mentioning right now. So normally a function with a return statement, and the return statement has some JSX. So this is also a functional component. This is also a functional component. So a normal function, this is a special function with just normal function, JavaScript function only, but the special characteristic is that if that particular function returns a JSX element, then generally that is called a functional component. But there is another type of component which is called class based components, and it behaves exactly like functional component, but it is written in a slightly different manner. So I'll show you by an example. So let's name that something else. So let's say header2.css, JS, and ideally you should name it same as the component name, but then I already have a functional component just for the sake of showing you that there is a separate type of component, and that's why I'm creating a new component header in a separate file. That's why I'm naming it separately, but differently. But other than that, everything is same. Now the difference is that in functional component there is a function which returns JSX, right? But in class-based components, you create a class instead of function. So you create a header class instead of a component, instead of a function. So instead of a function header, you create a class header. However, the difference is that it extends, and we already know what is extends. It inherits from some other class, defined class, which is already a React component. Okay, so there is a named export called component. Okay, and that is available inside this React package, and that you can use. Now this is a class based component. However, for what JSX to render, right? For showing that, we, rather than directly returning it like from a function, you can directly return it like this, right? But what you do is that in class based components, you define a method called render, and inside that method you return the JSX. Okay, so here directly there is a function which returns JSX. In class based components, you create a class, and inside that class you create a render function, and that render function returns the JSX, right? And now we simply have to export default header. Okay, and now it is available perfectly, which means that now I can I can simply take this and use it. So instead of header, if I use, so you can see that right now the earlier header was there, this header thing. If I simply change header to header 2, then everything will work same. Simply the color is changing because inside header component I said that use style header.css, but inside header 2 I have not said, right? So I can say that here also, and then everything will be exactly the same. Now you might be thinking that, yeah, there are two ways. Why there are two ways, and what is the advantage? In fact, this looks simpler, right? So that's the thing. For simple cases, for simple for simple components, you should use functional components. That should be fine. But as the component becomes more complicated, then there are some advantages of using class-based components rather than functional components. So right now you should think it like that any UI any component which you are trying to create, you should learn it in both ways, that how to create a class, how to create the same in class-based components and how to create the same in functional components. Both you should learn. In fact, in some of the projects, exclusively class-based components will be used, or it can be other way around, that only functional components can be used. But definitely you can use both of them also in the same project. In fact, I'll show you that in app. Let's say something like this, that this is header and this is header 2, and let's use both of them, so header and header 2. and it will work out of the box, right? And to distinguish, let's say in header 2 I don't import the style, so you can see that yeah, so actually what is happening is that yeah, the problem is that this header.css, it adds this class globally, right? And that's why, so let's do something like this, that for header 2 I have a separate component, then it will work fine. So header 2.css, so take the same thing and let's name us some different class name. So let's say header 2, okay, and inside the header 2 component, let's use a different class name, header 2, right? And then you can see that you can see that yeah, so you can see that if you import this header 2, then this is working fine. However, if in header 2 I do something like magenta, then it will be like this. So basically what is happening is that as you can clearly see that both are completely separate components, and they are reusable in their own sense, completely separately. However, one is a class based components, one is a class based component, and one is a functional component. So this one is a functional component and this one is class based component, right? So just I'll keep this example as it is, so that later as and when we are trying to show you that what is the difference between class based components and functional component. So what I will do is that I'll simply so right now I'll simply comment it, but generally whenever I will try to show, then I will also import header 2 component, and then I will show that also, right? But you should always learn that whatever you are doing in one type of component, how to do exactly the same thing in other type of component also. Now you must be thinking that what to do, like it's pretty plain and simple, right? Whatever you are returning, you return it from here. That is the difference, right? But there are a lot of differences, because right now we have not delved into much of the syntax of React components, right? So there are many things which are done in React, and doing all those things are different in class-based components and functional components. So that we will learn as we go forward. Okay, but that should be a fine primer for our components. Just one thing, in class-based components, again you are using something like named export from React, right? You can also use something like this, like React, and then here rather you can use React dot component. So this will work also exactly fine. So I'm not I've removed the this part header 2, but anyways that will also work exactly the same. Okay, so yeah, that should be fine, and we are pretty good to go from here. In the next video we are going to learn something more about React.